Heathens. Welcome back. Today we have the one and only, the incomparable Dr. Josh. Sorry. And he is here kindly to discuss the second volume of the Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament, as well as a chapter that is coming out in an edited edition. So welcome. Hello, Josh.
Oh, thank you for having me and Paul back.
I was just hiding behind you. So, Volume 1 of the Atheist Handbook was a huge success. At least it seemed to be. Everybody owns it at this point. I can't say that's because of me.
But you will.
I can't say, but yes. Anyway, a resounding success. And Volume 2 is coming out in fairly short order, correct?
Yeah, so Megan is making her way through. She's, I think, almost through chapter 4, which is about the Exodus. So she's got a few more just to do her read through, and then it'll be going out for peer review. So Eric Klein is going to be reading it along with Ron Hendel, Robert Rosetko, I think is going to be reading it.
And I'll get
other scholars.
The final one.
Yeah, you can give it that last go over. But hopefully it'll come back maybe within a month and a half, and then do the final little touch-ups. I'd like to get it out by the fall. That's my goal.
I think we'd all like that as well, but no pressure, Can you sort of give us an overview of what's going to be in that volume? I think I know generally, but for the people that do not, I'm sure they'd be very interested.
Yeah. So, the books in this series are designed to sort of break into two major parts. The introductory chapters are the first three, and they go over sort of basic background information to the ancient Near East and the Hebrew Bible in particular. And then the last 4 chapters focus in on specific sort of hot button issues or hot button topics that come up a lot, particularly in apologetic circles when atheists and skeptics are engaging with Christian apologists, fundamentalists, those sorts of people. So in this volume, there's the introductory chapter that kind of gives the narrative, just the bare bones narrative of what's going on in the Old Testament. In the first volume, we went from Genesis 1 and creation down to the death of Moses at the end of the book of Deuteronomy. And then volume 2 picks it up with Joshua and the conquest of Canaan and tells the story down through the fall or the end of the united monarchy. So it takes, through David, Saul, David, and Solomon. And then volume 3 will pick it up there and go through to the return of the exiles. So that's, I think, that seems to be a very useful chapter for people, which is good. It sort of, frames the narrative, leaving out a lot of seemingly extraneous things. Chapter 2 is continuing with the history of the ancient Near East, this time from the Egyptian perspective. So it's a history of Egypt. And again, very broad overview and more how it relates as much as it can to the Levant and, when it comes in contact with the Old Testament. And then chapter 3 is the archaeology chapter. And that one is probably one of the ones that I'm most excited about because I took some time and went through the archaeology of the conquest, or the archaeology of the period when it was purported to have happened. So it's structured in a like the main section of it. It's structured on Eric Klein's, I think it's 2006 book, From Eden to Exile. And it looks at, I tweak it a little bit, I nuance it a little bit to sort of for my own purposes, but it looks at 6 major cities, 6 or 7, and the archaeology of those cities. And they're all either from Transjordan, from outside of Canaan, or from Cisjordan, from inside of Canaan. And these are all cities that the Israelites are supposed to have like completely destroyed, right? Or very, very seriously crippled. And we just look at it like, what are the archaeological, like the different strata? What do they tell us? How does the site's history reconstructed? And does it match in any way with what we would expect from Joshua's conquest? So that was a fun chapter to write. Then
is strata the PhDs call strata? Like once you get a PhD, do you start pronouncing it as strata?
I think it's both ways. It's like bathroom and bathroom, probably.
Do you know anyone that calls it a bathroom?
Nice lady in the next room.
Oh, okay. Well, she's British.
Yes. Actually, Oliver as well. I don't know if Oliver's British.
Half British.
He only calls it that, though, when he's in the garage. So,
Oh, Lord.
Sorry. So then the hot button issues for this book, I'm also pretty excited about. The first one is the Exodus, like history or myth, or somewhere in between, which is really cool. And Ron Hendel is going to be reading through that one, which I'm really excited about. And then the next chapter is violence and genocide in the Old Testament, particularly as it relates to divine commands of violence and genocide, because there's a whole lot of violence and genocide, in the Old Testament, but focusing in on when God commands it, Yahweh commands it. So, then
because when He commands it, it's actually okay.
Then it's okay.
Yeah, it's actually moral. Okay. If you didn't know.
Yeah, it would be a sin not to do it. You know what I mean?
I know. Think of all those lives that could have been saved. Pure evil, to be honest. Sorry, continue.
Yeah. Feel weird joking about that, but I mean that's really how it's framed. And so then chapter 6, I think it is, 6, that's right, is about sex crimes in the Old Testament and comparing them to the ancient Near East. I focused in specifically on adultery and rape. So, trying to look at what are the laws that govern or that speak to the crime of adultery and the crime of rape, and where does it put women? Right, that's really what we're looking at. Where does it put women?
Next to the cattle.
Who can commit adultery? What does it mean to commit rape? I wish that was like a
funny haha, but it's true.
Yeah, so it's not. It's definitely not. So that chapter was read already, and he gave me some feedback. Jay Caballero, who's down at University of Texas, Austin, getting ready to graduate here, hopefully soon. But of course, he's writing his dissertation on sex crimes in the Hebrew Bible and Ancient Near East. So I wanted him to put his eyes on it. Yeah. So, and then finally, I'm looking at, did the Old Testament plagiarize? That's the 7th chapter. And that was a lot of fun. I used a lot of that material when I did the 2 videos with Kip on this topic, Kip Davis. We still haven't published the second video in response to Inspiring Philosophy. I don't know that it's going to be coming out, but the script is done. So we just got to
who else
find some time.
You talked about plagiarism in the Old Testament with that actually was put out? Rhymes with Heathen Queen.
Oh, yes. Right.
Oh, yeah. Good times. Anyway. Guess I'll just delete that off the internet.
Wow. I was speaking very specifically about a response to Inspiring Philosophy. But, I mean, if you want to get offended
where are you at?
we can.
Kip. Hello?
Kip's, you got to get Kip on, talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls. I mean, like.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
He's goddamn brilliant. So yeah, that's what's coming up, and I'm actually really excited about it. I read back through it, and it's a lot to cover. It sort of spread me out a bit writing it, but I feel like I leaned pretty heavily on, as I do, the scholars that specialize in this stuff. So, and being able to make that information maybe a little more palatable sometimes. So it should be good. Thank you for letting me ramble on about that for
Oh, of course.
an hour and a half.
I am an hour and a half. I was fortunate enough to be able to read most of it already. Shout out to Josh for sending me the early copies. Not the early copies, but I guess the drafts. And I found it incredibly interesting. It's, I think, going to be really useful to a lot of people, especially those of us. I mean, I don't necessarily do counter apologetics, but in arguing with theists, like I do from time to time.
Yeah, but I feel like you do.
Just like sometimes, occasionally. Anywho, I think it's going to be very useful. It's already been useful to me. But what I kind of want to focus in on is this chapter on violence and genocide in the Old Testament, because it was actually picked up by another scholar folks may or may not have heard of. And it will be coming out in an edited edition. Would you like to tell the people about this?
Yeah. So Dr. Robert Rosetko, Hebrew Bible scholar, independent scholar, has done a lot of work on like textual criticism and linguistic dating of the Hebrew Bible, those sorts of things. Brilliant guy. If you read his CV, you just sort of get tired after a while because he keeps going, you know. And like I hope one day to have, you know, several pages of a CV, but I can't remember how. Saw me online, maybe. I'm not sure, but he emailed me and he said, given that you're an evangelical, I'm writing this. He said, I'm writing this contribution, and he's one of the editors of the edited volume. The title of which is "Misusing Scripture: What Evangelicals Are Doing with the Bible, or What Are Evangelicals Doing with the Bible?" And he said,
Nothing
I'm writing
good.
this chapter on textual criticism, which, you know, spoilers, it is a brilliant chapter. I was very honored to read it early. But he said, would you read it and just give me some feedback specifically on, as a former evangelical, are there things that you think I could hit on that would make it, you know, even more meaningful to someone who might be thinking about whether evangelicals, as an evangelical, you know, if they're doing something very biased, maybe with the text.
I mean, are
So
they ever doing anything that's not very biased with the text? Former evangelical here.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. No.
So I read it and I thought, you know, it'd be really interesting if, you know, maybe do this one little thing. So I wrote him some notes back and I said, there's this one thing that I think might be really useful, do some comparative analysis with the ancient Near East. And I told him, you know, my advisor wrote his dissertation on textual criticism, Sumerian literary texts, and I did some work on that. And I did something similar, that comparative stuff, in the Atheist Handbook. And so I sent him the chapter on violence because I do that there probably the most. And he wrote back and I was floored. He said, I've spoken with the other editors. We'd like you to like rework this chapter for the edited volume. And I mean, I was like,
golf clap.
Why? You guys are writing like cutting edge stuff.
Oh my God.
But
you're such a dork.
I was very, very honored. So I've reworked it, cut it down a little bit.
You know, you have a PhD, right?
That's true, but I mean,
From the
like,
John
you know,
Hopkins?
I'm not tip of the spear. You know what I mean? Like, you know, like the back of the handle or something.
I don't even know what that means. I'm not sure.
Not
you
sure
know what
either,
it means.
which is why I'm not the tip of the spear. I don't even know what that means.
Anyway, yes, it's shocking that other scholars would want you to write on something you're an expert in. It's pretty wild, to be honest. Can't imagine why. In any event, so this chapter sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not, I've read it, that evangelicals sort of look at things like genocide in the Old Testament, and they make these really garbage arguments justifying why it's okay there, but like not okay. I don't even want to say not okay now, because I'm sure if they thought God commanded it now, they'd just fall in line, right? But this sort of approach of modern evangelicals and their sense of morality, looking back at the Old Testament and its violence, its genocide, and somehow doing these like weird mental gymnastics in order to justify all of this. I keep saying these words, but all of this violence and genocide in the Old Testament. Meanwhile, and I don't think this is a part of your chapter, I'm just throwing this in. Meanwhile, they're saying like, listen, if we have an abortion, like murder, not moral, right? This is like, their favorite line is like a million babies slaughtered and like nobody cares. And it's like, well, first of all, no. But second of all, hello?
Yeah.
The call is coming from inside the house. The God you worship and the shit you're justifying is so much worse than this made up straw man situation.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, if you want to talk a little bit more, I guess, about what kind of arguments you address in the chapter, I don't want you to give it all away, but
sure.
arguments that are made by evangelicals, and then sort of how you rebut those.
Yeah, I mean, sort of to frame it, our 9-year-old Piper listens to Adventures in Odyssey. I don't know if you're familiar with Adventures in Odyssey.
What do you mean I'm familiar with Adventures in Odyssey? I was an evangelical child.
I try not to assume things.
Like asking if I had a subscription to Brio magazine. Obviously.
There you go. Okay, noted.
Come on. Western Christian
like, do you know who DC Talk is?
Home.
That sort of thing.
No, only Stephen Curtis Chapman.
Yes, right.
Born. What has that song? Born by a Tennessee River or something. Born by a. Anyway. Lord of the Dance, real banger.
Oh yeah, well, go West, young man. So she listens to Adventures in Odyssey, and they're for the most part, I think they're okay, right? At least the ones that she's listening to. But every once in a while, Megan sort of has to run defense a little bit for sanity, and so like she'll come in and she'll say, "Oh, so we should obey our parents because that's like we're obeying God." It's like, yeah, okay. Maybe not.
Halfway there, kind of. Yeah. Like, yes, I would like if you would obey me, but not.
Right. But it allows us to have those conversations. But one of the things that Megan had a conversation with her about, which is really, really good recently, is there's an episode about David and Goliath. And Megan said to her, well, why is it that Goliath deserved to die? And she kind of sat back and she said, well, because he was the bad guy, right? And he was trying to like conquer Israel, and Israel's just, they're the good guys and they were just trying to defend themselves. And like, okay. And having that discussion about like, well, what if it wasn't actually that way, right? What if that's from one very specific perspective?
Right.
And this is really the issue that I find, as basic as that sounds. It's what I run into all the time, and I wish it were just online. It's not. There is this presumption, there is this conclusion that is, sort of being worked backwards from. And it is that, Yahweh and those that were chosen by him are actually justified, right? They're actually in the right when he commands them to do something.
But only because they've decided that whatever God says and does is right. without
Yeah.
any consideration for like what is right actually.
Yeah. And this is something that, Daniel Block, who wrote a brilliant 2-volume commentary on the book of Ezekiel. And if you've read through the Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament, Volume 1, there's a chapter on Tyre, and I cite Daniel Block several times.
Sorry, the thumbs down was not for the Ezekiel commentary. It's for his terrible arguments that I know are coming.
Yes, yes,
Sorry,
that's right.
So everyone knows.
But he, there's a portion of the book of Ezekiel, I think 16, where, Yahweh is described as a husband, and his chosen people are described as like a bride. And
bring on Song of Solomon.
And the language and the imagery is incredibly violent and abusive toward women, right? And when you read it, like it talks about exposing her to her lovers, right? And he has this comment because he's got a section like an excursus that deals with, well, how do we handle this problematic passage? And he says 2 things that I think are just vomit worthy. I don't know. One, and I'm not kidding. Like it might make you sick. So trigger warning. The first is we should, in this discussion, before we start talking about like violent imagery or violent commands, those sorts of things that might be attributed to God, we need to first frame them through the lens of his grace and his mercy, right? We need to start there. So whatever it is that we're getting ready to say about him, whatever we're getting ready to critique. Yeah, right.
I mean, I know I'm not asking like you. I know you feel the same way, but it's just like, why, bud?
So I say in the chapter, essentially, how many times do we say to battered women who are trying to summon the courage and the strength and the financial resources and wherewithal, and really even just to get out of that psychological manipulation?
I mean, that's often the hardest part.
Yeah, of course. To leave this abusive person, do we take them in and say, no, look, before we go critiquing Frank, let's make sure that we're couching this through all the good things that he's done in the past, right? All the really nice things that he's done. No, I mean, what? No, of course we wouldn't do that.
Some people do.
Right. I guess if you're in a church or something, you might do that. But yeah. But sorry, that's not fair. Certain denominations, Southern Baptist.
John MacArthur.
Yeah. So, but of course that's ridiculous, right? We would never, normal people, right, would never think that way.
Non-abusers.
Right. Yes. But the issue is that if you're coming at it with a conclusion, if you've already set up that you're going to look at the data through that lens with that bias, it's very easy then to go, oh, I see why he treated Israel that way. That makes sense. Okay. And so like the what that turned to was the second statement that he made, which is he's talking about how, in the metaphor, Israel has gone after these other gods, has committed idolatry. And so Yahweh has done these terrible things as punishment. And the text talks about, like, in your youth, I did all these wonderful things for you. Like you were by the side of the road, sitting in your own blood, essentially. And I took you up and I clothed you and I raised you and all this stuff. And then I gave you all these fine gifts and, beautiful clothing, all this stuff. And you went and whored around, right?
I don't know. Sounds fun to me.
Yeah, I mean, don't knock it till you try it. As long as it's consensual. But, even if it weren't, right? Even if let's assume worst case scenario in this metaphor, you actually do have a partner that is being, like, is cheating, right? Is doing something that is, I think, unethical. the atrocious behavior that the cheated on spouse inflicts on the wayward spouse is just grotesquely out of proportion.
Right.
And the comment that he makes is far from being, and I'm paraphrasing, but far from being an abusive partner, he's actually just reacting to the horrible thing that Israel did. And he lavished all of these gifts upon her, but beware to her if she tramples his gifts underfoot.
That's not really how love works, as it turns out. I mean, you're welcome to leave if the person's not doing the things that you need,
of course.
But you're not welcome to take like a hammer and beat them about the head. Like,
yes,
you can go. No one's stopping you. Like, no one's requiring you to stay there. But like, there's certainly a limit to things you can do and things you cannot do. Actually,
and this sort of
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Please go ahead.
Like this sort of dovetails into one of the two main arguments that evangelicals use when talking about divine commands of violence in the Old Testament. The first one is that the people that received that violence, that violent behavior, they were totally deserving of it. Right? They were really, really wicked. They were awful, awful people, and they deserved what they got. The second one that I'll come back to is it's just hyperbole, right? It's exaggerated language. So the first one, the question that nobody seems to ask in evangelical circles, and I say this very confidently because I didn't ask it, is what we were just talking about, right? The example that I give in the chapter is if you grew up in a household where interrupting someone was a really, really big deal. While somebody's talking, you just don't interrupt them. I can see that, it's a little rude to do that. But if you grew up in a household where if someone interrupted someone else, the person that got interrupted walked over and punched them in the nose, you would grow up believing that is a justifiable action, that is a justifiable response, because you've grown up seeing, well, when X happens, person does Y, everybody says, sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted you. That's why you punched me in the nose. Therefore, that becomes a legitimate, commensurate response to the level of whatever crime committed against the person.
Yeah. I would be dead because I interrupt people for a living these days. So.
But this is the issue, right? When you get out in the real world and somebody interrupted you and you went up and hauled off and punched them in the face, you would ask yourself, why am I in jail?
Yeah,
right? I don't understand. What am I doing here?
So
I
weird.
was justified in doing that. And they would ask you the question, why were you justified? Well, because that's what my household prescribed as the punishment for doing that. You say, well, so why is that justified? Well, because they did it, and that's how I responded. And it becomes this circular argument, right? Why is it justified? Well, because that was the prescription. Well, why was it the prescription? Because that's what you do when you do that. Well, why is that? Because that's what was prescribed.
Yeah.
And people see this everywhere else, right? It's like the quintessential special pleading. You see it everywhere else, except in your own holy text. And so when these people are subjected to genocide, or just like mass slaughter, or even like best case scenario, driving them out violently from their land, right? That's not a lot better.
What a merciful guy. Yeah.
Right.
Just
but
complete displacement.
Yeah. The reaction is always from the evangelical community. Well, I mean, they deserved it. my God gave them all this time, just 400 years, right, to stop doing this. And yeah, but what were they doing? They were worshiping other gods. Well, why does that deserve genocide? Well, because that's what Yahweh prescribes for that. Yeah, but why? Well, because that's what you get when you commit idolatry. Yeah, but why is that the right? Well, because that's what Yahweh prescribed.
I would like off this ride.
Yeah.
Thank you. It makes me very dizzy.
So, like, that's one aspect that I should stop talking because I've been rambling now for quite a while. But yeah, that's sort of one argument that's used, and so I get into the problems with that.
And I know this is not what this chapter is about, but I just can't help myself from saying it. Something that drives me nuts about that justification that people give, because I've heard it my entire life, is that it totally sort of, I don't know, debunks is not the right word, but flies in the face of this free will argument that they also love to give, right? So, like, we have free will. That's why God doesn't intervene in, I don't know, whatever, any terrible, god-awful thing that's going on. We have free will. We get to decide what we're going to do. And yeah, there's consequences somewhere at the end of time here. But he doesn't God, I can't talk today. Intervene with things on earth. And then at the same time, they think that God is omniscient and created all of us knowing every single thing we would do before we died. And so effectively is saying that God created these people with free will, knowing full well that they would then choose to worship other gods because of where they lived and who their parents were, and that he was going to command their violent death en masse. Where is the free will in that?
Yeah.
Like, where is the omniscient, omnibenevolence in all of that?
Yeah.
It doesn't work on so many levels, and I know that's not what you're addressing in this chapter of this book, but it just drives me bonkers to hear people say this stuff like it's an actually good explanation, and then turn around, look me dead in the eye, and tell me that the reason that God doesn't stop child bone cancer is because free will.
Yeah.
Take a fucking seat.
Yeah.
Take a side. Take a lane. Because whatever this is, it's so just logically incompatible. It hurts. It hurts my brain. Anyway, sorry. Please continue.
No, I think those are really, really good questions, and ones that
that they're never going to answer. So why ask?
I don't find the apologetics satisfying. So there's a couple of different approaches to answering this justification because they're so wicked angle. The first one is like historical, right? Like, were these Canaanites, for example, these wicked people? Right.
And
now, if we're just saying
wicked?
that they, if we're just saying that they were wicked because, they worshipped other gods, well, I mean, that's a really weird standard for wickedness, and I think you probably need to think through if that really is deserving of genocide, right? No,
I mean,
the answer.
The scary part is looking at a lot of Christianity today. They would say yes.
Oh, yeah.
Or at least they would think that. They might not say it quite outright just yet. Some people certainly would.
Sure.
But like the vitriolic theology or stance or whatever that comes out of a lot of Christians today, it's not that far off.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, sorry.
So, but that's a real question. So if you actually don't have a group of people that's crazy wicked, like the text seems to be describing them. So, for example, something like child sacrifice, the way the biblical text portrays these Canaanites is that they're just like killing all their babies, right? Well, I mean, where do we get that information from? The Old Testament, right?
The
Can
people
we
writing
find
about
that
it after it
archaeologically?
happened, trying to justify it.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean, we don't. Heath Durrell, Francesca Stavrakopoulou have dealt with this amongst many other people. But I mean, I summarized their data in volume 1 of the handbook. But I mean, like, no, right? We don't have evidence outside of the Bible that has the Canaanites doing this incredibly, like being like all the time doing all this child sacrifice. Like we just don't have that. You have like Punic colony. It's much later. Anyway, so but that's one aspect to it here. You have the historical problem, the archaeological problem. Like it just doesn't. You can't verify that sort of thing.
Right.
But the bigger issue for me is that it's special pleading all day long, because I talk about comparing it to other ancient Near Eastern texts, and I look at, for example, kings that wrote or that had things written in the Middle Assyrian period, the end of the second millennium, or in the Neo-Assyrian period, in the first millennium. And they talk about how their god, Asher, is the one true God, right? Or is the right God to be worshiping. And
how else are you going to control people?
Right. And he commissions the king to go out into the foreign lands and to subjugate them, right? And why? Well, because they've been sinful. They've been
so
rebellious. Naughty. Yeah. And they have, essentially smacked Asher in the face, who was trying to be benevolent and provide for them and reach out to them. And so that's why, and even more so, as all Mesopotamian kings say, right? The Middle Assyrian and Neo-Assyrian kings will all say that they're the good guy, right? They're the shepherd. They're the one that
say I'm the bad guy.
Right.
Right. I mean,
but if
very, very few people are going to say that, and everything they're going to write down. I was just talking to William Reed about this, right? It's all going to be propaganda.
That's right.
There's a reason, right? The victors are writing the history. Or if even
except in the Old Testament. Let's be careful, Jessica, because in the Old Testament, that's the real one.
I know. Sorry. I mean, listen, I understand that Israel was largely not the victor in the Old Testament, right? But they are still the ones writing things down. So whether or not they're trying to bolster themselves at that time or actually trying to record, which, I mean, according to the archaeological data, it sounds like they weren't trying to record something that really happened, maybe something in a collective memory, maybe something that they sort of needed in order to bolster morale. So I understand that they weren't like some, victorious army that was always winning, but they were the ones writing it. So, of course, what they're going to write down is going to be something that reflects well on them, at least in these situations of violence, right? They're not going to say, yeah, we slaughtered a whole bunch of people, and that was pretty shitty of us. Like,
right.
Yeah, anyway.
Yeah. And so this is really the issue, right? And again, so that it's clear, we're talking about a type of Christianity, certainly types of evangelicalism, certainly fundamentalism. They're coming to the text with a presupposition of inerrancy, right, and inspiration. And when you do that, and you interpret these texts, again, in a particular way, then you end up having to defend these types of things. So, somebody that's a more progressive Christian, this isn't going to be an issue for them. But that's what ends up happening here is there's this high level of special pleading where they can look at the Middle Assyrian king. They can look at Tukulti-Ninurta the first, and they can say, "Oh, of course he's going to write that about Kashchili-Ashu the fourth. Right? Of course he's going to do that. He's going to say that Babylonian king was really, really wicked. And in fact, like in the story, it talks about how the Babylonian king is actually like recounting his sins against Shamash that has brought to
I'm
quote the
sure.
north and down upon him. And it's like,
Yes.
yeah, everybody recognizes that as propaganda. Everybody. But when we get to the biblical texts, different story, right? And so that's one of the things that I do is I essentially just lay out several examples of ancient Near Eastern texts and say, would you be cool with this? And if not, why not? And how does that then not apply to the Hebrew Bible, to the Old Testament story?
Because God, obviously.
Yeah.
Duh.
And that's what I mean. So like one of the examples that I give, and I guess I don't want to give everything away, but I mean, if you think about the story of Samson, it was an article written in another edited volume, I think maybe 5 years ago, talking about violence in the Old Testament, or maybe just in the Bible. And they bring up the story of Samson. And if you think about what Samson did, here's a guy that's empowered by Yahweh, who has, these in the story, that these moral problems, right? Yeah, he's doing things that he shouldn't be doing throughout the story. But what happens at the end, right? He gets his hair shaved off, so he loses all his strength. And now he's captured by the Philistines and he's brought into the temple of Dagon, and his eyes are gouged out. And he says to the little attendant there, the little boy, can you lean me up against the main pillars of the temple? And at this point, his hair started to grow back and he's realized the error of his ways. And he says, "Oh, Yahweh, please give me my strength one more time so that I can exact revenge." Yahweh gives him his strength back. And what does he do? Pushes the pillars down. And the text says he kills in that suicide act. And as soon as you say suicide act, people go, ooh, ooh.
Don't like that too much.
Yeah. He killed more Philistines than he had in his entire life. And there's no other context. If you were to tell that story, taking out all the personal names, taking out the specifics, and just say a guy commits suicide, brings a building down on like 1,000 people or whatever.
I mean, I feel like we've seen that.
Yeah. It's terrorism, right?
It's like
that's what it is.
A day that terrorism. We mourn every year.
Yes, exactly.
We went to war over this. I mean, but that's a whole other bag.
But I mean, like, you remember, Samson is held. Samson's held up as like this great guy, right? I mean, Hebrews 11. He's one of the heroes of the faith. Yeah,
right. Heroes of the faith. Like, but how he fucked up a whole bunch and then he killed a bunch of people and himself. And if you're a member of certain parts of Christianity, you think suicide's a sin.
Yeah.
Ask me how I know.
But this is where I think when we have these discussions with people, if we can get somebody to a place where they're actually wanting to talk about this, trying to get them, or willing to talk about it, like trying to get them to go to other ancient Near Eastern contexts, for example, or paint these stories in a different way so that it takes the specifics out, it takes them out and puts them somewhere else, and say, what would you say about that? And they'll realize, hopefully, that what they're doing is special. They're starting with, well, I'm right. And therefore, the text is, correct. Right. So that's like one.
Though, because I've had some of these discussions, and again, I do think a lot of this is like planting seeds, right? I hate that term because it's Christian, but that's kind of the best way I can phrase it. When I was an evangelical, you couldn't tell me anything ever because the Bible says it. So the end. But even though in the moment I would have told people like, nope, 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 nope. Every time someone sort of laid out a point like that, something in my brain was like, oh, it just makes a little too much sense. I don't like it. Yeah. And so I might have like pushed back on it in the moment, but after, Jesus, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, 50 times, for me anyway, there became like a breaking point where it's just like this,
Yeah.
just, it doesn't make sense. And so I actually have to tell myself it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And you are deciding to believe this because you think that God has a higher understanding than you. And so
That's right.
you are bypassing all of your logical, rational, and reasonable faculties and in deciding to intentionally ignore them and justify some bullshit that you wouldn't ever allow anyone else to justify outside of this context.
Yep.
And so I don't know that I really have a point here. It's just, I think often when we talk to people like this, even if you can get them to the point where they're saying, yeah, it would be wrong in any other context, but in this context, because Yahweh commanded it, like we're just back at the beginning, right? Because Yahweh commanded it, then it's okay. And it's almost like they'll sometimes acknowledge, they might not say that doesn't make any sense, but they'll acknowledge that, like, yeah, I wouldn't put up with it over here, but God said it's okay, so I have to believe, like, there must be a plan, there must be something that I don't understand. And
yeah,
it's
that's
like,
right.
How, but also I get it. And I think there's certainly going to be some people that just never, they just are able to exist with that level of cognitive dissonance, and it doesn't eat their brain alive.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, I think once you get that, like it happened with me, once you sort of hear it enough times, or you, even if it's not on the same topic, but you see the logical inconsistencies over and over and over and over and over again, eventually something does kind of snap. Or like, there's only so far I can stretch my like logical brain before it's just like, it doesn't work. I mean, it's either going to tear itself apart, or like I have to do something about this, because like it can't be both ways.
Yeah, and I think like this is an important place to just sort of say this little bit. Like, my goal is not to get people to leave Christianity, and I'm not saying that shouldn't be people's goal, but it's not really mine. All I'm trying to get them to do is to think maybe my version of Christianity is shit, right? And maybe I shouldn't be a part of a version of Christianity that tries to regulate and to take the rights away from people that are human, just like me, right? Maybe I shouldn't be trying to take the rights away of people for being who they are. Maybe I shouldn't be doing that. So that's all really I'm after, is to get them to move away from this type of Christianity that tries to take down essentially the marginalized.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've said it once, I'll say it 1,000 times. I don't actually care if you're a Christian. I care if you're a bigot. That's all.
Yes.
So, like, if you, I mean, I know plenty of Christians. I think I'm on a podcast with one. Like, I know people that I'm friends with. I mean, Megan, I'm friends with Megan. She identifies as a Christian, right? So, like, it's not Christianity itself that I have a problem with, and people will debate me on that, and I don't care. It's not Christians I have a problem with on an individual level, I guess. Like, I know Christians, I love Christians. It's people that trade in their humanity, kind of, for a religion, right? Because they're saying, like, yeah, I actually am okay with killing entire people groups, and it's actually fine if you live in a country where, I stoke so much hate and people want to kill you because of it. That's fine. At a certain point, like, you are losing you're sacrificing your humanity on the altar of theology. And that's what I have a problem with, right? If you're a Christian and you don't want to vote against people's rights, and you actually love your neighbor like you're supposed to, and you're not screaming at people constantly that they're going to hell, that's fine. Enjoy your spiritual beliefs. I don't really want to hear about them too frequently, but like, that's fine. So you addressed the first argument regarding hyperbole, and I believe there's a second. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, the second argument is the hyperbole.
Sorry.
No, because I get it. I get it. They're so bad, it's hard to keep straight. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So, if the first argument is that you hear all the time is, well, the people that, God commanded this genocide against, they were just really, really wicked and they deserved it. So it was all justified. The other approach is that, it says that he killed them all or that he commanded genocide, but it's just this ancient Near Eastern war rhetoric, right? It's just hyperbole, and if you read somebody very, I'd say very famously online, somebody like Paul Copan, again, Paul and I are friends. Like we've had discussions online, but I mean, like this argument is not a good one, in my opinion.
There is no good argument for genocide.
Yeah,
sorry, but for even death or murdering people. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the example that is so often given is, it's just the way that they talk. Like, when you go to your kid's football game and you say, no, I want you to get out there and I mean, you need to kill them. I mean, kill the other team. Or you're sitting in the bar and you're like, man, the Vikings really slaughtered the Patriots.
Yeah, except
but that's not really what we mean.
Actual battles.
Yes. So, there are a couple things that we need to say about this. First of all, is there rhetoric? Is there hyperbole? Yes, of course. I mean, this is how you talk in the ancient Near East. So I give an example of Sennacherib, who talks about how he absolutely laid waste and killed every individual. Not a single person survived. And then he goes on to talk about the tribute that he exacted from the survivors. It's like...
Right. Also, like, how would you know? You wouldn't know, right? It's almost impossible to know if you've killed everybody.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's just, it is the way that they talked. But John Collins, who I can recommend his book up one side and down the other. It's What Are Biblical Values? Amazing book, 2019 publication, I think. He came on and did an interview with us about this on our channel, and you should have him on. He's such a good guest.
I'm sure he would love to come on my little baby channel.
I think he would. But he said, did they exaggerate? Yes. Did they kill a lot of people? Yes. Did they say they killed more? Yes. But they still killed a lot of people. So this thing about hyperbole is weird to me.
Like because the way pedantic about Matt's death, like,
yeah, I mean, so the way that
two people left, it's not genocide.
right. I mean, so the way that this has been used in the past, I think, is actually a useful way. And that is to say, all right, look, if Sennacherib says, I killed every single person, and then later on it's clear that city wasn't actually devoid of humans after he left, does that mean that he was, like, this didn't happen historically? No. Right? So it's useful to know that there's a way that kings speak that use this exaggerated language. It doesn't mean that they went down there and high-fived them, right? It doesn't work that way. So when you're looking at things like trying to identify whether an event can still be considered historically reliable, I mean, a text can be considered historically reliable to a certain degree. Like that's a useful way to frame that, to understand the hyperbolic language. But when you're trying to then say that, like, they didn't kill people,
it's not
I guess.
Even that sorry, I was just thinking that comparison you gave at the beginning. It doesn't even sound like hyperbole, right? It's like a total misrepresentation. Yeah, if I said you call me 500 times a day, and in reality you call me 20 times a day, right? It's still the same act. I'm just blowing it way up. But, like, saying, like, that sports team slaughtered the other sports team isn't hyperbole, really.
No.
It's a different thing, right? So, like,
yes.
I'm sure there's a word for it that people smarter than me know, like What it's
Yeah,
not is a one-to-one.
Yeah, it's a separate category of type of event, right? You're
Right.
using metaphorical language, um, because you're not actually saying. And a good example, if we changed it to what you were saying, would be like we the Steelers beat the Patriots by 100 or like 1,000 points, or something,
Right.
and that would be the same category. We're still talking about points, but it's just, like the Warriors beat them by, 200 points. It's like,
Right.
yeah, I mean, that it was by like, 30.
Right.
But it was a significant gap, but you're using hyperbole, but it's the same category. We're talking about points. Here, this is just trying to downplay not only the severity, but almost sort of getting it completely off the hook.
Right. It starts
by
to
using
sound
this.
like denial, right? Like,
Yes.
no, that didn't actually happen. And that's real dangerous territory when it
Yes.
comes to mass death.
Yes.
I mean, I can think of at least one instance of mass death where if you deny it, it can get you in a whole bunch of trouble, as it
Yes.
should.
Yes.
So it's just real weird. It's real uncomfortable. It's real dangerous that folks are willing to go down this path and say like, nah,
Yeah.
actually, it probably didn't happen. Like,
And this is so this is what, there's another aspect of this, and I don't really deal with this in the chapter. It's something that I think is probably interesting to explore. There are different passages in the text that describe, rather than there being wholesale slaughter, it talks about like, I will drive them out before you,
mm-hmm.
right? And that is also sort of brought out as, see, he didn't kill them. He didn't have them. He just drove them out of the land. And what I always say in response to this, because this has come up in debates, is if you've ever seen the Lord of the Rings series, there's a scene where the orc, I think is who they are, have been sent out by Saruman, and I'm really proud of myself if I remembered that name correctly. And
I'm proud of you too, but I don't actually know. So
well, he sends out these horrible beasts, with these jagged swords, and they're there to kill everybody, right? But what ends up happening is that many of them flee. These people of the land of Rohan, they flee. And so there's a particular scene where like a mother is trying to get her 2 kids onto this horse and send them off to safety, and she's going to stay back. And it's heart-wrenching, right? Like, because she's probably not going to make it. And in the background, as the horse is taking the kids off, like the village is burning, people are fleeing. This is what you want to use? Like, he didn't kill them. He just drove them out.
It's because as Americans, we are so far removed from the experience of displacement and of violence happening on our doorstep, right? As Americans, we're very used to invading other countries, occupying other countries, and letting all of the violence happen there, dropping bombs on other countries, displacing people in the Middle East left and right, in South America left and right. But we are so far removed from it that we can't even imagine it. And so in our minds, it's like they showed up and said, okay, like, y'all have to move. We brought in the U-Hauls. Like, we'll just help you out, move them over there. Because actually, this is like, God doesn't want you here. Because we don't have, at least for the most of us, right? Of course, there are people that are immigrants or have had really horrifying things happen to them. But as a group, evangelical Americans are pretty goddamn privileged and have not experienced anything even close to this. And so, in their mind, that's a pretty good option, at least compared to death. And when you talk to people that have experienced warfare like this and then were displaced, some of them will tell you, in fact, it's worse than death. Yeah. Like, it's worse than they would have chosen death. And so I think it's really as I said, privileged and really ignorant
Yeah.
to make this argument, because anyone that's lived through war, I'm not speaking for everyone, but it is not a universal experience that folks are glad to come out the other side. And that's the really sad reality, is that like this argument that's being used to say like, look, God showed mercy in this way, actually may have been worse for some people.
Yeah.
Because think about it, you get displaced in this incredibly violent way. You probably lose some of your family, you lose your resources, you lose whatever savings you have, you lose your cattle, you lose whatever. You get pushed out to some place you've never been, potentially with a language you don't even speak. And what options do you have? You become someone's slave, you're an indentured servant, which isn't a ton better. Or you have to try and work from the ground up, all without the benefit of any assistance, your family half the time, or like speaking from a very modern lens, any kind of treatment for the trauma you just went through. Like,
just like the thing that I like to say is like, people don't like HOAs, right? They don't like homeowners associations because you're telling me I have to cut my grass, right? What if people came over really nicely and said, this isn't your house anymore. Okay, you have to leave.
You gotta go.
What you'd be like, oh man, you didn't kill me.
Wow,
that's so nice. Wow. I mean, let me just go on my way. Like, what? Come on. But what I do in the chapter is sort of try to bypass all of that because to a certain degree, because again, I think it's a very potent argument, but you only have like 10,000 words. So the thing that I wanted to do was make it, again, showing that it's special pleading at its core. And so it's guerrilla warfare, right? Using their own weapons back against them. So if you read Paul Copan's book, or if you read Lawson Younger, who's pulling that work from, they have these examples that they're using, and Sennacherib is one of them. Well, look here, more Shili, this Hittite thing, or Sennacherib, or here's this Egyptian inscription, whatever. It's showing where it says like, I wiped out everybody, like the Merneptah stele is that sort of thing, left none alive, right? But it doesn't actually mean that. So it's hyperbole. You're like, okay, cool, I agree with you. So were you okay? Were you okay with what Sennacherib did? Would you stand behind Sennacherib? Yeah, I mean, no, of course you wouldn't. What? Yeah. But why do you stand behind God's commands, Yahweh's commands? Well, it's because you're starting with this is the right God, and I have the right text, right? And if you can get, I think if we can get them to that point to be able to say, okay, yes, it is the same. I'm just saying that mine is the correct one, and that's why I believe it. I'm happy. Like, I'm happy that we've gotten you that far.
I genuinely don't think that I have rolled my eyes more in any other interview that I have done. And it's not because of you, it's because of these god-awful arguments that are continuously put forth and treated like they deserve some kind of consideration or respect. They're terrible arguments. I wouldn't accept them from anybody else about anything, and yet I'm supposed to sit here and treat this argument like it has some special merit? No, get the fuck out of here. Which is my approach. I'm glad you're writing a book about it.
But I mean, like you and I have dealt with this in another stream on slavery, right? I heard somebody say recently, and I don't want to go off on that tangent, but it fits in here, I think, very, very well. People have talked about in Deuteronomy 21 with the captive bride, right? And you hear it all the time. Well, what else were they supposed to do with these women, after they've killed all the men? And, it was a mercy to take them. And in fact, people have said to me, these, women that are left over, like they will try to make themselves really, really attractive so that one of the soldiers will take them. See, Josh, this is what they wanted. And you know what I think of? You ever seen Schindler's List?
Yeah.
You know, the women, there's a scene, I can't even talk about it, but there's a scene where they're like trying to make themselves look good so that they're attractive enough to the Nazis that they don't get killed.
Yeah.
Would you look at that?
Anyone can sit there and not be like, first of all, just, I don't even like disgusted, not with the women, but with the fact that they're in that situation.
Yes.
And heartbroken, I think, tells me a lot about the person I'm talking to, and none of it is good.
I mean, if you say to someone who has a woman who's been raped by a man, and you say, well, wait a minute, you didn't scream out. In fact, there were points where you tried to like smile at him. You wanted this, right? You didn't fight back. You know, well, wait a minute. Why didn't she scream? Why did she smile at him? Why did she say when he put that knife to her throat, oh, this feels so good? Because she didn't want to die.
Yeah.
Right. So to then say, well, this was the best option, rape instead of death. I mean, this was really, you know.
It also says a lot about the God that you believe in. If you think that was the best option, and he was like, well, this is as good as I can do, that guy sucks. If that's the best he can do, that guy fucking sucks. You might want to consider a new God.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be 100% clear here. There are many, many Christians that will not have a problem with what I'm saying, right? They will say, yeah, that's an interpretation. That's an interpretive model that I think is ridiculous, right? They won't defend slavery. They won't defend genocide. They won't defend rape. They won't do those things. And so I'm not talking to those Christians. I'm not talking to those people that have, you know, what I consider to be like much better interpretive models.
Reasonable kind of.
Yeah. It's the people that do go and defend slavery, that do go and defend genocide. That's what's so problematic to me.
I agree. And on that uplifting note,
yes.
Thank you for being here and for discussing your upcoming book and the upcoming chapter. Please tell the people where they can find you if they don't know already. Where they can pre-order your books, or if and when, where or when they might be able to find this edited volume. Also, we didn't talk about this, but I know that the Sumerian grammar book is getting ready to potentially be released. So there might be some folks interested in that. So take it away.
Yeah, I mean, probably the best thing to do is all of our books are always going to be on Amazon. That's where they get. It's one of the big places that they go. So if you ever search Joshua Bowen on Amazon, anything that I've written will come up. But if you follow me on Twitter, I am at DJ Hammurabi, Hammurabi 1, the number 1. And maybe even better, if you follow Megan, who is Digi _ Hammurabi, we always tweet that stuff out. So we are Digital Hammurabi. If you search Digital Hammurabi, that'll come up as well. But yeah, we always put that stuff out on Twitter. So again, the Atheist Handbook should be coming out hopefully by the fall. I think probably the Sumerian Grammar will come out by the fall as well, at volume 2 of that. And then I think that Rutledge is talking about putting out the Misusing Scripture edited volume. And by the way, there are some absolutely brilliant scholars that are going to be putting chapters in there. I'm just super excited about it. But that should be coming out, I think, early next year.
What do you think that says about you? Just asking.
That they're being very, very kind, or they had some space that they needed to fill.
Okay. Anyway, so like, subscribe, follow me on all my social accounts, or don't, and leave a comment. Let me know what y'all thought. As always, Josh, thank you for being here. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for
I
having me.
Will see y'all next time. Bye.